3 weeks later, Marcus stood in his home office at 5:30 a.m., reviewing election results that looked like a political tsunami had swept through Willowbrook Heights. His phone had been ringing since midnight, but he'd let every call go to voicemail. There would be time for victory speeches later. Right now, he had work to do. The numbers were staggering. Marcus Chen, 287 votes. His nearest competitor, Sarah Martinez, 31 votes. The rest of the field hadn't broken double digits. More importantly, the 4 other candidates he'd personally recruited for the board had won their positions by similar margins. In a single election, the homeowners had replaced every single member of the old guard. Rebecca's flight wasn't due until evening, but she'd been texting updates from the airport all morning. The local news wants an interview. Channel 7 is calling you the HOA Avenger. I can't decide if I'm proud or terrified. Marcus smiled as he typed back. Why not both? His first official act as president-elect had been to schedule an emergency board meeting for 7 a.m. The old board had officially resigned the day after his hearing. Patricia Whitmore's resignation letter was 3 sentences long and dripped with barely contained fury. But their departure had left the HOA in a legal limbo that needed immediate attention. At exactly 7 a.m., Marcus's doorbell rang. Sarah Martinez stood on his porch holding 2 cups of coffee and a folder thick enough to stop a bullet. You might need caffeine, she said, handing him a cup. Also figured we should talk before the others get here. Marcus had recruited Sarah for vice president, specifically because she was the only person in the community who'd consistently challenged the old board's decisions. A retired paralegal with a master's degree in public administration, she had the legal background to navigate the complexities ahead and the backbone to keep Marcus honest when his corporate instincts got too ruthless. Tell me you found something useful in the financial records, Marcus said, leading her to his dining room where he'd spread out documents across every available surface. Useful is an understatement. Sarah opened her folder and pulled out a spreadsheet that looked like it had been through a hurricane. The old board wasn't just incompetent, they were creative. Take a look at the vendor contracts. Marcus scanned the numbers, his trained eye immediately catching the anomalies. These landscaping costs are insane. $15,000 a month for basic maintenance. That's because we're not getting basic maintenance. We're paying premium rates for premium service, but the actual work being done is bargain basement. I drove around the community yesterday taking pictures. Half the common areas look like they haven't been touched in months. Kickbacks? Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. Almost certainly, but here's the interesting part. Sarah flipped to another page. The landscaping company, Green Valley Services, was incorporated 6 months after Patricia Whitmore's husband retired. From his job as a county groundskeeper, their business address is a P.O. box, and their only client is us. Marcus leaned back in his chair, whistling softly. So we've been paying the Whitmore's retirement fund through inflated landscaping contracts. It gets better. The pool maintenance contract, the company is owned by Douglas Henley's brother-in-law. The snow removal service, Janet Fisher's nephew, Jesus. Marcus was already calculating the financial implications. How much are we talking about? They've been skimming about $40,000 a year for the past 3 years. But Marcus, that's not the worst part. Sarah pulled out another document, this one bearing an official letterhead that made Marcus's blood run cold. What am I looking at? He asked, though the sinking feeling in his stomach suggested he already knew. A notice from the county tax assessor's office. The HOA has been delinquent on property tax payments for the community center and the common areas for 18 months. We owe $23,000 in back taxes, plus penalties and interest. Marcus stared at the document, his mind racing through the implications. If we don't pay, the county can seize the common property and sell it at auction. The community center, the playground, the pool, all of it. Sarah's voice was grim. We have 30 days. The doorbell rang again. Tom Henderson, the new treasurer, arrived with Dave Patel, the new secretary, and Linda Morrison, the new member at large. Each of them carried folders, coffee, and the slightly shell-shocked expression of people who'd just realized what they'd signed up for. Marcus gathered them around his dining room table, which now looked like mission control for a hostile takeover. Before we start, Marcus said, looking at each of them in turn, I want everyone to understand what we're dealing with. The old board didn't just mismanage this community, they systematically looted it. We're not just starting over. We're starting from a hole that's deeper than anyone realized. He laid out the financial situation with the clinical precision of a pathologist performing an autopsy. The inflated vendor contracts, the depleted reserves, the delinquent taxes, the maintenance backlog, each revelation, drawing gasps and muttered curses from his new board members. "So, what's our move?" Dave asked when Marcus finished. "Because this sounds like we need a miracle." "We don't need a miracle," Marcus said, pulling out a thick binder he'd prepared before dawn. "We need a plan. And fortunately, I've had 3 weeks to put one together." He opened the binder to reveal a comprehensive restructuring proposal that would have impressed any Fortune 500 executive team. Phase 1. Emergency stabilization. We immediately terminate all existing vendor contracts and rebid them at fair market rates. My research suggests we can cut our monthly operating expenses by 60% just by eliminating the sweetheart deals. "Can we do that legally?" Linda asked. Sarah nodded. "The contracts all have standard termination clauses for cause. Financial malfeasance definitely qualifies as cause." Phase 2. Revenue recovery. Marcus flipped to another section. "We're going to sue the old board members for breach of fiduciary duty and recover every penny they stole. I've already spoken with a law firm that specializes in HOA litigation. They're willing to work on contingency." Tom leaned forward. "How much are we talking about?" "Minimum $120,000, possibly more, once we complete a full forensic audit. That's enough to pay the back taxes, rebuild our reserves, and fund the maintenance." "Backlog? And Phase 3, Dave asked. Marcus smiled, and for the first time since the election, it was a genuinely warm expression. "Phase 3 is where we build something better. We implement transparent budgeting, establish resident committees for oversight, and create a governance structure that makes it impossible for anyone to ever pull this kind of scam again." Linda flipped through the proposal, her expression growing more impressed with each page. "Marcus, this is incredibly thorough. How long did this take you?" "About 18 hours a day for 3 weeks," Marcus admitted, "but that's what it takes." To fix a system that's been broken for years, Sarah was studying the legal strategy section. "This lawsuit is going to get ugly. The old board won't go quietly. I'm counting on it." Marcus's expression hardened. They had their chance to resign gracefully and cooperate with the transition. Instead, Patricia Whitmore spent the past 3 weeks spreading rumors that I'm some kind of corporate raider who's going to bankrupt the community. She's been calling homeowners individually, trying to convince them that the election was invalid. "Can she do that?" Tom asked. "She can try." But while she was making phone calls, I was documenting everything, every vendor payment, every contract, every decision that put this community at financial risk. Marcus pulled out another folder. "I've also been in touch with the IRS." The room went very quiet. "The IRS," Dave's voice was barely above a whisper. "Homeowners associations have tax-exempt status, but only if they operate for the benefit of the community, not for the personal enrichment of board members. What the old board did violates federal tax law. The penalties alone could put them in serious legal jeopardy." Marcus looked around the table at his new board members, good people who'd volunteered to help fix their community, now realizing they were part of something much bigger than a simple HOA election. "I want everyone to understand," he said carefully, "what we're about to do is going to create enemies. The old board has friends in this community, and some people are going to see us as troublemakers. Are you all still in?" One by one, they nodded. "Good." Marcus closed the binder. "Because in exactly 4 hours, I'm holding a press conference on the front steps of the community center. Channel 7 News will be there, along with reporters from the Herald and the county paper. I'm going to announce our lawsuit against the old board, reveal the extent of their financial malfeasance, and explain exactly how we're going to fix this mess." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "You're going nuclear. I'm going public. There's a difference." Marcus stood up, pacing to the window that overlooked his perfectly compliant stone border. For too long, HOA corruption has thrived in the shadows, protected by resident apathy and legal complexity. Not anymore. We're going to make this a model for how communities can hold their leaders accountable. His phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. "Just landed. Saw the news van in our driveway on the Ring camera." "What did you do?" Marcus typed back. "Exactly what I said I would do. Come home and help me change the world. One ho." Marcus arrived at the Willowbrook Community Center 30 minutes early, carrying a leather briefcase that had seen him through hostile takeovers, SEC investigations, and congressional testimony. Inside were 400 pages of meticulously organized documentation that would either make the HOA board his willing collaborators or his thoroughly defeated enemies. The community center's main room smelled like industrial carpet and broken dreams. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across rows of folding chairs that had seen better decades. Marcus chose a seat in the front row, directly facing the table where the board would sit, and began arranging his materials with the precision of a surgeon preparing for a complex operation. At 6:45 p.m., residents began trickling in. Marcus recognized most of them the Hendersons from Oak Street, always walking their ancient golden retriever. Sarah Martinez from Elm Drive, who organized the annual block party. The Patel family from Birch Lane, whose teenage son had been mowing Marcus's lawn since middle school. None of them made eye contact with him. By 7:10 p.m., the room held maybe 30 people in a space designed for twice that number. The board members filed in, looking like they were attending their own execution. Patricia Whitmore, the HOA president, wore a navy blazer that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage payment. Her steel gray hair was pulled back, in a bun so tight it could have been used for architectural support. "This meeting of the Willowbrook Heights Homeowners Association will come to order," Patricia announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd never been challenged. "We have several items on tonight's agenda. But first, we'll address the compliance hearing requested by Mr. Chen of 47 Maple Crest Drive." Marcus stood, nodding politely to the room. "Thank you, Madam President. Before we begin, I'd like to confirm that this hearing is being recorded for the official record, as required by Section 12.43 of the HOA bylaws." Patricia's smile flickered. "Of course, Mr. Kumar is handling our documentation." Robert Kumar, the secretary, held up a digital recorder that looked like it had been purchased during the Clinton administration. Marcus pulled out his phone and set it on the table in front of him. "Excellent. I'll also be recording to ensure accuracy. Now then." Marcus opened his briefcase with a theatrical flourish that would have made a courtroom lawyer proud. "I believe there's been a fundamental misunderstanding about the nature of this hearing." He pulled out a thick folder labeled Exhibit A and placed it on the table. "This contains photographs and measurements of every board member's property, taken this morning with a professional surveying instrument, Ms. Whitmore. Your decorative brick border extends 26 inches from your foundation. Your stone retaining wall extends 38 inches. Ms. Fisher, your raised flower beds extend 42 inches. The room had gone dead silent. Even the ancient air conditioning unit seemed to be holding its breath. Marcus continued with the relentless precision of a man who'd spent his career dismantling corporate lies. "According to the guidelines you revised 6 weeks ago, each of these installations represents a violation carrying a minimum fine of $1,000, with potential daily penalties of $50 until compliance is achieved." Douglas Henley cleared his throat. "Mr. Chen, I think you're misunderstanding the spirit of these guidelines." "The spirit?" Marcus's voice cut through the room like a scalpel. "Mr. Henley, I've spent 23 years in corporate restructuring. I don't deal in spirit. I deal in facts, figures, and fiduciary responsibility." He pulled out another folder. "Exhibit B. 5 years of HOA financial statements, all public record. Your organization has been operating at a deficit for the past 18 months. Your reserve fund is depleted to the point where a single major repair would bankrupt the association. Yet somehow, the board found money for a 40% salary increase." Last year, whispers started rippling through the audience. Sarah Martinez leaned forward in her chair. "Wait, you gave yourselves raises while our pool has been closed for maintenance issues." Patricia's face was turning an interesting shade of red. "Mr. Chen, this hearing is about your specific violation." "No, Madam President, this hearing is about community standards and equal application of the law." Marcus was just getting warmed up. Exhibit C. Email correspondence between board members discussing the strategic implementation of new guidelines to generate revenue. Through violation fines, the whispers turned into murmurs of outrage. Had spent 6 hours the previous night parsing through public records requests. and what he'd found was better than he'd hoped. On March 15th, Mr. Henley wrote, and I quote, "We need to find creative ways to increase revenue streams. The violation fine structure hasn't been utilized effectively." On March 22nd, Ms. Fisher responded, "Landscape modifications are the easiest to cite and hardest to dispute." Janet Fisher shot to her feet. Those emails were taken out of context. Were they? Marcus opened another folder. Exhibit D. A complete audit of violation notices issued in the past 6 months. Interesting pattern emerges. Every single violation has been issued to homeowners who attended the February town hall meeting where residents complained about the lack of transparency in HOA finances. The room erupted. Residents were turning to each other, voices rising, some standing up to get a better look at Marcus's documents. "This is a targeted harassment campaign disguised as rule enforcement," Marcus continued, his voice carrying over. "The chaos. You've weaponized your authority to silence criticism and extract revenue from the very people who've been calling for accountability." Patricia banged a gavel that seemed to appear from nowhere. "Mr. Chen, you are out of order." "No, Madam President, you are out of order. Your entire board is out of order." Marcus pulled out his final folder, the one that had taken him until 3 a.m. to prepare. Exhibit E. A formal petition for the removal of the current board, signed by 127 homeowners, that's 40.7% of the total properties in this development. The room went silent again, but this was a different kind of silence. This was the silence that comes right before an avalanche. Marcus continued, his voice now carrying the quiet authority of a man who just revealed the nuclear option. According to Article 8 of the HOA Charter, a petition signed by 40% of homeowners triggers a mandatory special election within 30 days. Furthermore, during the election period, all non-emergency expenditures and rule changes are suspended pending review by the incoming board. He turned to face the audience, most of whom were now staring at him like he'd just parted the Red Sea. "But here's the beautiful part," Marcus said, allowing himself a small smile. "While researching the petition requirements, I discovered something fascinating in the HOA's Articles of Incorporation. There's a provision that allows for emergency assessment fees to cover operating shortfalls, but only if approved by a simple majority of homeowners." Patricia had gone very, very quiet. "So? Here's what's going to happen," Marcus said, turning back to the board. "You're going to withdraw my violation notice because it's based on retroactively applied standards that violate basic due process principles. You're going to issue a public apology to every homeowner who's received a similar notice, and you're going to submit to a complete financial audit by an independent accounting firm. And if we refuse," Douglas Henley asked, though his voice suggested he already knew the answer. Marcus's smile widened. "If you refuse, I invoke the emergency assessment provision. Based on your current financial statements, this community needs approximately $400,000. To meet its reserve fund requirements and address deferred maintenance, that works out to an emergency assessment of $1,282 per household." The room exploded again. Residents were shouting, some at the board, some at each other, some at Marcus. "However," Marcus continued, raising his voice above the chaos, "there's an alternative. The board can resign immediately, allowing for the special election to proceed. The incoming board can then implement a structured 5-year financial recovery plan that I've prepared, which would limit individual assessments to $200 per year while still meeting all our community obligations." He closed his briefcase with a decisive snap. "Oh, and one more thing. I'm running for HOA president in the special election. My platform is simple: transparent finances, fair rule enforcement, and no more treating this community like a personal piggy bank for people who've forgotten they're supposed to be serving their neighbors, not exploiting them." Patricia Whitmore looked like she'd been struck by lightning. Janet Fisher was staring at her hands. Douglas Henley had turned a shade of pale that suggested he might need medical attention. "The choice is yours," Marcus said, addressing the entire room now. "We can do this the easy way, with a peaceful transition to accountable leadership. Or we can do it the hard way, with emergency assessments, financial audits, and potential legal action for breach of fiduciary duty." Sarah Martinez stood up. "I'd like to second Mr. Chen's petition." Tom Henderson raised his hand. Third. Within minutes, half the room was on their feet, voices overlapping in a chorus of support that hadn't been heard in Willowbrook Heights for years. Patricia banged her gavel frantically. This meeting is adjourned. But nobody was listening to her anymore. They were listening to Marcus Chen, the man who'd just handed them back their community. As Marcus Chen stared at the $1,000 fine notice, his hands trembling with rage. The Willowbrook HOA had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. They'd targeted the wrong homeowner. What they didn't know was that Marcus wasn't just any resident. He was a corporate restructuring expert who'd dismantled Fortune 500 companies for breakfast. And now, armed with a stack of legal documents and a photographic memory for financial loopholes, he was about to turn their own bylaws into a weapon that would triple their fees overnight. The HOA board thought they were untouchable. They were about to learn that when you corner a man who makes his living finding cracks in systems, you better pray he doesn't find yours first. Marcus Chen had always prided himself on playing by the rules. 23 years in corporate restructuring had taught him that systems worked best when everyone followed the same playbook. But as he stood in his driveway at 6:47 a.m., coffee growing cold in his hand, staring at the bright orange violation notice fluttering from his mailbox like a surrender flag, he realized the Willowbrook Heights Homeowners Association had just rewritten the rules of engagement. The notice was pristine, printed on expensive letterhead that probably cost more than most people's monthly grocery bills. Marcus tore it free, his engineer's mind automatically cataloging the details, watermarked, paper, embossed logo, even a raised seal that caught the morning light. Someone had spent serious money making this look official. Maple Crest Drive, violation, unauthorized landscape modification, fine amount, $1,000.00 payment due, within 10 business days. Marcus read the notice 3 times, each pass making his blood pressure climb another notch. Unauthorized landscape modification. He looked across his front yard, the same meticulously maintained lawn he'd been tending for 8 years, the same Japanese maple he'd planted the month they'd moved in, the same stone border that matched every other house on the street. Unauthorized landscape modification, he muttered, crumpling the notice before smoothing it out again. His analytical mind needed to process this properly. The violation specifics were buried in paragraph 3, written in the kind of legal speak that would make a contract lawyer proud. Resident has installed decorative stone elements exceeding the approved dimensional parameters as outlined in Section 4.2.7 of the Community Guidelines, specifically relating to border materials that extend beyond the 18-inch maximum distance. From the primary structure foundation, Marcus walked to his front porch, measuring the distance with his eyes. The stone border around his flower bed was exactly 16 inches from his foundation. He'd measured it himself with a contractor-grade tape measure when he'd installed it 3 years ago. He had the receipt, the measurements, even photos from the installation day. "This is insane," he said to the empty street. His phone buzzed. Rebecca's contact photo filled the screen, his wife of 15 years. Currently 3 states away helping her mother recover from hip surgery. "Morning, honey." Her voice carried that familiar warmth that could usually calm him down from any work crisis. "How's the fortress holding up without me? We've got a problem." Marcus held the notice up to the phone camera. "The HOA just fined US $1,000. I'm serious, Becca. Look at this thing." He read the violation aloud, his voice getting tighter with each word. The silence stretched, long enough that Marcus wondered if the call had dropped. Rebecca's voice had shifted into the careful tone she used when she thought he might be having a breakdown. "Our stone border is perfectly legal. We got approval from the architectural committee before we installed it. I have the email thread in my files." That's what I thought too. Marcus was already walking back into the house, pulling up the HOA website on his laptop. But according to this notice, they've changed the rules. They can't just change rules retroactively. That's not how HOAs work. Marcus had spent enough time in corporate boardrooms to recognize the sick feeling spreading through his stomach. It was the same sensation he got when he realized a client had been hiding crucial information, or when he discovered that a company's books had been cooked beyond recognition. "Let me call you back," he said, already diving into the HOA documents section of their website. What he found made his coffee taste like ash. The community guidelines had been updated 6 weeks ago. Section 4.2.7 now read decorative border. Materials may not extend more than 12 inches from the primary structure foundation. The change was buried on page 47 of a 63-page document, with no notifications sent to residents about the modification. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the grandfather clause, or rather, the complete absence of one. According to the new language, all existing installations that didn't comply with the updated standards were subject to immediate violation status and associated fines. Marcus pulled up the HOA board meeting minutes from 6 weeks ago. 5. Board. Members present: Patricia Whitmore, President; Douglas Henley, Vice President; Janet Fisher, Treasurer; Robert Kumar, Secretary; and Sandra Mills, Member at Large. The vote to approve the guideline changes had been unanimous. He cross-referenced the addresses of the board members with Google Street View, a skill he'd perfected during his years of corporate due diligence. Patricia Whitmore's house had a decorative brick border that extended at least 2 feet from her foundation. Douglas Henley had installed an elaborate stone retaining wall that was easily 3 feet out. Janet Fisher's property featured raised flower beds with stone borders that made Marcus's installation look microscopic by comparison. Every single board member was in violation of their own new rule. Marcus leaned back in his desk chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. In his professional life, this was the moment he lived for, the instant when a seemingly impossible puzzle suddenly revealed its solution. He'd found the crack in their system, and it was big enough to drive a truck through. He spent the next 4 hours doing what he did best: research. The Willowbrook Heights HOA was a corporation, registered with the state, governed by a board of directors, and subject to all the same fiduciary responsibilities as any other business entity. They collected roughly $800,000 annually in homeowner fees from the 312 properties in the development. Their operating budget was public record, and Marcus downloaded every financial statement from the past 5 years. What he found was a masterclass in financial mismanagement. The HOA was hemorrhaging money. Their reserve fund, which should have contained at least 6 months of operating expenses, $12,000. They'd been deferring maintenance on common areas for 3 years running. The pool needed resurfacing. The playground equipment was past its replacement date, and the main entrance sign was held together with prayer and duct tape. But the board members had voted themselves a 40% raise in administrative compensation just 8 months ago. Marcus printed everything: bank statements, meeting minutes, expense reports. His phone rang again. Rebecca. "So, I've been thinking about this HOA thing," she said. "No," Marcus said, his voice carrying a certainty that made Rebecca pause. "It's not about the money anymore." "Marcus, I know that tone. What are you planning?" He looked at the stack of documents on his desk, then at the violation notice still sitting next to his coffee cup. "I'm going to teach them the difference between running a community and running a scam. But sometimes your idea of teaching people lessons involves federal investigations and congressional hearings." Marcus laughed, remembering the pharmaceutical company CEO who'd tried to shortchange his consulting fee 3 years ago. That man was probably still explaining to shareholders why their stock price had tanked when Marcus's forensic audit had uncovered their creative accounting practices. "This is different," Marcus said. "This is personal. That's what worries me. Trust me, Becca. By the time I'm done with them, they're going to wish they'd never heard the name Chen." After he hung up, Marcus opened his laptop and began typing an email to Douglas Henley, copying all 5 board members. Subject: Reviolation Notice. Property address: 47 Maple Crest Drive. Dear Mr. Henley and esteemed board members, I am in receipt of your violation notice dated today regarding my property's landscape features. While I appreciate your attention to community standards, I believe there may be some confusion regarding the measurements cited in your notice. I would like to request a formal hearing to contest this violation as provided for in Section 12.4 of the HOA bylaws. Additionally, I am prepared to present evidence that my installation complies with all applicable guidelines as they existed at the time of installation. I look forward to resolving this matter in a manner that serves the best interests of our entire community. Imagery, I believe, we may have an opportunity to discuss. Community-wide, Stan.